He paid me $10, mocked me with his son, and left me humiliated. But that summer job? It taught me more about grit, dignity, and revenge than school ever did. You ever have one of those summer days where the sun feels like it is staring you down? Not just hot, but personal. That was the kind of day I found myself dragging a rusted-out wheelbarrow across Mr. Brenner's yard, sweat already soaking the back of my shirt, and the job had barely started. I was 15, and it was my first real summer job. My mom said I needed to earn some pocket money instead of spending the whole break inside with video games and cereal bowls. We lived in this quiet neighborhood where lawns were a big deal, and Mr. Brenner's was practically a jungle. So when he asked if I could come by twice a week and help with the yard work, I thought I got lucky. Easy cash, right? Wrong. From the second I showed up, Mr. Brenner looked at me like I had interrupted something important. He barely said hello, just handed me a rake and told me the back was worse than the front. No shade, no water, no smile, just work. I figured maybe he was just the grumpy type. Some people are like that. So I got started, pretending not to notice the way he kept glancing out his window like he expected me to screw up. Every few minutes, he would step outside to point out a leaf I missed or tell me I was going too slow. At one point, I wiped my face on my sleeve and asked if I could get a drink. He just narrowed his eyes and said, "Work now, break later." Later never came. My hands started to blister, and my back was screaming from bending over too much. But I kept going. Because that is what you do when you come from a house like mine, where money is tight and pride comes cheap. After 2 hours, he finally came outside, inspected everything like he was running a boot camp, and said, "That'll do." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and handed it to me. No thanks. No eye contact. Now, I had been expecting 20. That was the rate he mentioned when we first talked. I opened my mouth to say something, but he was already turning back to the house. That was when I heard a voice I recognized. "Guess you're not too good for dirt after all." It was Logan, his son. We went to the same school. We were in the same grade, and he always had something slick to say, especially about people who didn't wear the right shoes or lived on the wrong side of town. "Poor kid doing poor kid work," he added with a chuckle. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words just died in my throat. My cheeks burned hotter than the sun overhead. Logan just shook his head and walked back inside like I was not even worth another thought. And that was when I felt it, not just anger, but something deeper. A kind of shame that wrapped around my chest like barbed wire. But I did not walk away. I walked around the side of the house and finished picking up the last few branches by the fence. My hands were shaking, but I did it anyway. Because if nothing else, I knew I had done the work. I started down the road, gripping that $10 bill like it might fall apart in my hand. My heart was pounding. My mind was racing. I did not cry, but I came close. And as I walked, I made 4 promises, quiet, bitter, and firm. What were those promises? You will find out. But just know this. That day, it changed everything. When I got home that day, I did not say a word. Not to Mom, not to my little brother, not even to the dog who usually ran up to greet me. I went straight to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and watched dirt and sweat swirl down the drain. My arms were sore, and my fingers felt stiff, like they belonged to someone else. There was something about the silence in that house that day. Normally, my brother would be yelling at the TV, and Mom would be on the phone with someone from work. But that afternoon, it was dead quiet. I think maybe I just tuned it all out. My head was still stuck in that moment. Logan's voice in my ear, that smug look on his face, and Mr. Brenner counting crumpled bills like every cent was too much to part with. I pulled my sleeves down to hide the red marks on my arms and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the $10 bill like it might explain something. My mom came in and gave me that once-over look only moms know how to do. She saw right through the silence, but she did not push. "You get paid?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." She raised an eyebrow. "How much?" 10. Her face tightened. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then just closed it again and went back to stirring the pot on the stove. I guess we both knew that pressing it would only make it worse. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My fan clicked in that slow, annoying rhythm, and I could not stop thinking about how cheap I had felt standing there. Not just underpaid, but underestimated. Looked down on. That is when I made the first promise to myself. I would never rely on physical labor to survive. Not when I was older. Not if I could help it. It was not that I thought I was better than the work. I respected it. What I could not stand was how people like Mr. Brenner used it to step on someone else. Like holding a rake made me less of a person, Like sweat on your back meant you deserved less. I tossed and turned for a while before I finally got up and grabbed a notebook from my desk. It was this old spiral one I used for random sketches and notes. I flipped to a blank page and wrote down that promise. Underlined it twice. Then I just stared at it, the ink starting to smudge from my thumb. I was 15. I could not change where I came from, but I could choose where I was headed. That night, I could feel something inside me start to shift. Like the version of me who swallowed his pride on that lawn was shrinking, and something stronger was trying to take its place. I thought about quitting the job, about walking over the next day and telling Mr. Brenner where he could shove his $10. But part of me knew if I quit, I would carry that shame longer. I needed to finish. For me. And deep down, I hoped maybe, just maybe, the worst part was already over. I was wrong. The next morning would prove that. And it would cut deeper than I thought possible. The next morning, I woke up sore. Every muscle in my arms and shoulders protested when I moved. But I got dressed anyway, jeans, an old gray t-shirt, and the same beat-up sneakers I had worn the day before. They still had bits of dried grass on them. I told my mom I was going back to finish the job. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but all she said was, "You sure?" I nodded and walked out before I could change my mind. The sky was overcast, which was a small mercy. The air was heavy, but at least the sun was not bearing down like a heat lamp this time. I walked slow, dragging my feet, not just from pain but from everything I was carrying inside. Part of me hoped Mr. Brenner would not answer the door, that maybe he forgot he told me to come back. No such luck. He opened the screen door before I even knocked, like he had been waiting. He gave me a quick nod, pointed toward the garage, and said the hedge trimmers were in there. No greeting. No small talk. Just back to business. I worked the hedges until my hands went numb. Every few minutes, he would step outside and grunt something about not cutting too deep or cleaning up better. The whole time, I was biting my tongue so hard I thought I might taste blood. About an hour in, Logan came outside. He had his phone out, barely looking at me, just scrolling and smirking. He leaned against the porch railing and watched like I was some kind of performance. Then he said it. "My dad says he only hired you 'cause your mom begged him. Said you guys needed the money bad." He laughed. Just once. Not loud, not long, just enough to twist the knife. I did not answer. I just kept trimming, pretending I could not hear him. But I heard every word. And they stuck. That was when I made my second promise. I would never mock anyone's job or where they came from. Not ever. Because that moment, that smirk on Logan's face, the way he talked like I was beneath him, showed me what real cruelty looked like. It was not just about wealth or class. It was about power. He felt above me because the world had handed him more, and he had never been taught to see people as equals. I felt like disappearing, like shrinking into the hedge I was trimming until I was nothing but leaves. But I finished. I swept the walkway, put the tools back, and stood there waiting for Mr. Brenner. He came out, glanced around, then handed me another $10 bill. "Next time, come on time," he muttered, even though I had been early. That was it. No, thank you. No water. No acknowledgement that I had just given him everything I had. And Logan? He stood behind him with his arms crossed, that same smirk stretched wide, whispering something I could not quite catch, but I knew the tone. I turned and walked. Faster than the day before. Heart pounding, fist clenched, shame burning in my throat. I should have said something. I should have stood up for myself. But all I did was walk, faster and faster, until I was out of sight. And I thought that was the end of it. But what I found waiting for me at school the next week, that was the real breaking point. By the time Monday rolled around, I had convinced myself it was over. The job was done, the humiliation behind me. I would go to school, bury myself in class, and move on. But high school is never that forgiving. First period was math. I slipped into my seat in the back like always, head down, hoping to stay invisible. But whispers were already moving through the room. I caught a few glances, a couple of smirks. Nothing loud, just enough to make my skin crawl. When Logan walked in, I knew something was off. He made sure to look right at me, just a little too long. Then he sat with his group, whispering something that made them all snort. I tried to tune it out, focus on the numbers on the board, but my stomach was in knots. Second period was worse. Someone had printed a picture. It was me, in Mr. Brenner's yard, dragging that old wheelbarrow, covered in sweat, bent over like I was about to collapse. It was taped to my locker with a bright orange sticky note that read, "Need help, poor boy?" I stood there frozen. Kids passed by, laughing under their breath. One of them pointed and said something I did not catch, but it did not matter. I felt exposed, like I was standing there with no skin on. That was when I made my third promise. I would always set clear boundaries and agreements, no more vague handshakes, no more, we'll settle up later. Because that $10 lesson had turned into a public joke. I had trusted someone's word, and it cost me more than money, it cost me dignity. I ripped the photo down, stuffed it in my backpack, and slammed my locker shut. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear into the floor and never come back. But I walked to class, kept my head low, pretended I did not see the stairs. In English, I sat behind a girl named Bethany. She used to be kind, quiet. But even she turned and said, "I didn't know you worked for Logan's dad." That's kind of sad. I did not reply. That whole day, I barely spoke. I went through the motions like a ghost. By the time the last bell rang, I felt like I had been chewed up and spit out. As I walked home, I looked at the cracked sidewalk, one foot in front of the other, and tried to breathe through the shame sitting in my chest like a cinder block. That was when the final promise came to me, not loud, not even angry, just solid and clear. I would never be ashamed of honest work. Not ever again. Because the truth was, I had shown up. I had done the job. I had sweat, bent, bled. And yeah, I got mocked for it, but I had faced it head on. There was no shame in labor. The shame belonged to the people who twisted it into something ugly. I got home that afternoon and sat on the porch steps, staring at the $10 bill still folded in my backpack. And I knew that one day, somehow, I would rise above it. I just did not know that someday would come sooner than anyone expected. Because the next twist? It hit like a storm. 2 days later, I was sitting alone at lunch when a kid I barely knew slid into the seat across from me. His name was Darren, quiet, lanky, always in the library during recess. I figured he was just looking for an empty spot, but then he leaned in and whispered something that made my blood freeze. I saw what Logan did. My cousin lives next door to the Brenners. Heard everything. I blinked. What do you mean? He glanced around and lowered his voice. Mr. Brenner didn't just underpay you. He told people you begged for the job. Said your mom was desperate and sent you over 'cause she couldn't pay the bills. He said you begged for $10 just to eat. I stared at him, my stomach dropping like a stone. That's a lie. I know. But he said it loud. Loud enough for the guy fixing their AC to hear. That guy's my cousin. I sat there silent, trying to keep my face steady while my hands balled into fists under the table. Darren added, "You didn't hear it from me. But Logan's been laughing about it in the locker room all week. Said something about you crying over a bottle of water." That was the moment I realized it was not just about class, not just about money. It was about power. They were rewriting the story behind my back, turning me into some charity case. A joke. That was the real humiliation. Not just the yard work, not the sweat, or the blisters, or even the $10 insult. It was the story being told about me. And that story had started to spread. I left school early that day. Faked a stomachache. Truth is, I felt sick, but not the kind that could be fixed with ginger ale and rest. At home, I went into the basement, our tiny unfinished basement that smelled like old paint and cold cement. I sat on the floor with my back against the washer, the light bulb swinging above like a single spotlight on a kid who was not ready to take the stage. I pulled out my notebook, the one where I wrote the first promise, and I flipped to a fresh page. This time, I wrote something different. I will write my own story, not theirs, not ever again, because I realized that if I did not decide who I was, someone like Logan would. And it would not stop with high school. It never does. People like that grow up to be bosses, politicians, landlords, gatekeepers. They shape the world for people like me, and they make sure the doors stay closed. But that day in the basement, that is when I made the real decision. I would become the kind of man who kicked down doors, who remembered where he came from, but never let it define what he could become. I just did not know that within the next 24 hours, someone would come knocking with a second job offer, a second chance. But this time, I would be the one setting the rules. The next day after school, I was walking past the gas station near the edge of our neighborhood, cutting through the alley like I always did, when I heard someone call my name. It was Mr. Ramirez. He ran the local hardware shop, this dusty little corner store where time seemed to move slower. He was in his 60s, wiry and sharp-eyed, always wearing those same faded jeans and red flannel shirt, no matter the weather. I had helped him once before, stacking firewood when I was 13, and he always remembered my name, even if we did not talk much. "You busy this weekend?" he asked, brushing sawdust off his hands. I shrugged. Not really. I heard about that mess over at Brenner's. Heard you worked hard. My stomach twisted. You heard? He nodded. Word travels in this town. People talk. But I do not care about gossip. I care about work. You interested in a weekend job? I need help moving inventory, painting shelves, clearing out the back room. It is not glamorous, but it is fair pay. I hesitated. How fair? 8 hours a day. 35 a day, cash. Lunch included. Water included. Respect included. That last part hit me harder than I thought it would. I looked at him. Really looked. And saw something in his face that I had not seen in Mr. Brenner's. Basic decency. I'm in, I said. Good, he nodded. Start Saturday. I'll have gloves for you. I walked home that day with something different in my chest. Not pride, exactly. Not yet. But something close to it. That Saturday, I showed up early. Mr. Ramirez handed me a pair of work gloves and a bottled water before I even got started. Every few hours, he checked in, asked if I needed a break, told me what needed doing, then trusted me to do it. He did not hover. He did not insult me. And when I swept out the storage room behind the counter, he said something that stayed with me. You work like a man, not a boy playing grown-up. That's rare these days. And for the first time since that whole thing with Logan and his dad, I felt seen for who I was. Not what I wore, not where I lived, not what some spoiled kid said behind my back. I felt like I mattered. At lunch, we sat on crates and ate sandwiches he picked up from the deli down the road. He talked about when he was young, how he built the store from scratch after dropping out of school to support his family. He said something that stuck with me. Honest work. It is not about what you do. It is about how you carry it. I nodded, chewing slow. I was thinking about Logan again. Thinking about that stupid photo. That orange sticky note. And I knew right then. They might laugh today, but one day, they would choke on their own laughter. Because I was building something they would never understand. And I had just started laying the foundation. What I did not expect, what I never saw coming, was what Mr. Ramirez showed me next, and how it would change everything. Late that Saturday afternoon, just as I was wiping down the last shelf behind the register, Mr. Ramirez called out from the back office. His voice was muffled, like he was talking through an old sweatshirt. Come back here a second. I walked past the rows of dusty paint cans and boxed-up light bulbs and stepped into the tiny office, barely big enough for 2 chairs and a desk that looked older than he was. He pointed to the filing cabinet beside him. Open the bottom drawer. I did, expecting rags or old receipts, but inside was a leather-bound ledger. One of those thick, heavy ones with yellowed pages and a faint smell of ink. He slid it out and laid it flat. Take a look. At first, I did not get it. The pages were lined with names, dates, amounts, hundreds of rows. Some had checks next to them. Some were underlined. Others were crossed out. What is this? I asked. My history, he said, tapping a finger on a name near the top. Every kid I ever hired. Every hour they worked. Every dollar they earned. Most of them never stayed long. Moved on to college, the military, some got married. But I kept track. Not because I needed to, but because it mattered. I turned a few pages and saw names I recognized, older guys from town. One of them coached Little League. Another ran the tire shop. They all started here. He nodded. Some just for a summer. Some longer. But all of them. They showed up. Did the job. Learned what it meant to earn. Same as you. I did not know what to say. My name was not in the book yet. But I could feel it coming. He looked at me and said, You keep showing up like this, you will make something of yourself. Maybe not right away. But it adds up. Every hour. Every little job. Then he added, And do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Not kids like Logan. Not his dad. Not even the voice in your own head. That last part hit me the hardest. Because I realized, standing there, that most of the damage had not come from the Brenners. It came from me, carrying their judgment like it was fact. I had been walking around all week wearing their version of who I was. But that moment, that was mine. I left the shop with $35 in my pocket, a full stomach, and something I had not felt in a while. Control. I walked home past Logan Street, eyes forward, shoulders squared. I did not flinch when I saw their porch light on, because I knew something he never would. You do not need to be born into power to have it. You just need to stop handing it away. But just when I thought I was turning the page, something happened the next week at school. Something that reopened every scar I thought I had sealed shut. 1 week later, we had a school assembly, one of those long, drawn-out ones in the gym where everyone's legs go numb and the teachers look more bored than the students. It was for Community Appreciation Week, where they handed out little certificates for volunteering or helping the neighborhood. I was not thinking about much that morning, just trying to get through the day. My mind was already on the hardware store. Mr. Ramirez said he had a new shipment coming in Saturday, and I had promised I would help unload. They started calling names. Kids went up to shake hands with the principal, posed for a photo, grabbed their paper certificate. Then I heard something that made my stomach turn. Logan Brenner, for leadership in neighborhood outreach. I blinked. What? He strolled up there in his usual too expensive sneakers, smirking like it was owed to him. A couple people clapped. Someone even whistled. The principal smiled and said, "For organizing cleanup efforts and showing young people the value of hard work this summer." Hard work. I could have laughed, if I had not felt like throwing up. I looked around. A few teachers nodded like they were genuinely impressed. One of the office aides leaned toward another and said something about how mature he is for his age. Mature. I felt something inside me crack. Not in an angry way, but cold. Sharp. Because I finally understood. Logan did not just mock me. He used me. Used that moment, that weekend, that sweat on my back, turned it into his story. Claimed the effort. Claimed the image. Took something I earned and pinned it to his own chest. And they all believed it. That photo on my locker? That was not just a joke anymore. It was branding. A message. You do the labor. I'll take the credit. I sat there on those hard wooden bleachers, my fingers digging into my knees, and I realized something I had not been ready to say before. I did not just want to rise above. I wanted to win. Not petty revenge. Not a fist fight in the hallway. I wanted to outwork them. Outthink them. Outlast them. I wanted to build a life so solid, so untouchable, that no smug kid from a porch could ever rewrite my story again. That day, when I got home, I sat on my bed and said to myself, I will succeed in silence. Let them talk. Let them laugh. When it is my turn, I will not need to say a word. But what I didn't know? That turn would come sooner than anyone guessed. Because something happened that night. Something that flipped the story upside down. That night, I was sitting at the kitchen table working through algebra homework when my phone buzzed. It was a group message. I almost ignored it, but the preview caught my eye. It was Logan's name, and a screenshot. I opened it. The image hit like lightning. There he was, Logan, on the school's private student forum, arguing with another kid. But he slipped. Said too much. One sentence, circled in red, read. Who cares if some poor idiot did the work? I made it count. I know how the system works. It spread like wildfire. By morning, everyone had seen it. Some said it was fake. Others defended him, claimed it was taken out of context. But the damage was done. One of the teachers, Mr. Kelton, a straight shooter who ran the community program, confronted him in the hallway in front of half the sophomore class. I was not there, but the story made it to every corner of the school. Logan got pulled from student council. His community certificate? Revoked. Publicly. The school issued a quiet little statement the next day. No names. Just a vague apology about a misunderstanding and corrective action being taken. But everybody knew. And here was the twist. I did not feel the joy I thought I would. There was no fist pump. No smug satisfaction. Just silence. People looked at me differently now. Some with guilt. A few with sympathy. One teacher pulled me aside and said, "If you ever need a letter of recommendation, you come straight to me." But I did not want sympathy. I did not want pity. I wanted change. That Friday, Mr. Ramirez handed me an envelope after my shift. I thought it was just my weekly cash, but when I opened it, I found a note. You have more grit than most grown men I have known. Use this for something that matters. Taped inside was a prepaid card, $100. I looked up at him, stunned. He shrugged. Consider it a bonus. Or maybe an investment. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the card for a long time. Not because of the money, but because someone believed in me. And that belief? It planted something in me I never expected to feel so soon. Hope. Hope that I could rewrite the story without tearing anyone else down. Hope that I could build something honest. And as I looked out the window at the dark street, past the Brenna's porch with its empty swing, I realized something else. I was already on my way. The last chapter was about to begin. And it was mine. I never worked for Mr. Brenner again. I never spoke to Logan after that mess blew up. He avoided me like I was invisible, which, ironically, was how he used to treat me anyway. But something changed that summer. Not around me, within me. I finished my shifts with Mr. Ramirez every weekend and some afternoons too. I saved every dollar. Spent none of it on games or junk food. Just tucked it into a worn envelope under my mattress. When school started back in the fall, I walked a little different. Not louder. Not with swagger. Just steady. Like I finally knew who I was. I did not need to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not to myself. One day in senior year, during a career prep workshop, they asked us to write down a life mission. Most kids scribbled half-hearted dreams or copied stuff from a poster. I wrote, to build a life where no one gets to define my worth but me. That was all. After graduation, I got a scholarship. Then a second one. Went to a state university, worked in the evenings. First in the mailroom. Then IT support. Then coding. Eventually, I started my own company. Small at first. Then it grew. Years passed. And now? Now I sit in a clean office with windows that stretch to the floor. I wear button-downs and jeans because I want to, not to fit in. My employees get paid on time. They get water when they need it. Respect when they earn it. Every single one of them signs a clear contract. No guessing games. I never forgot those 4 promises I made as a 15-year-old boy walking home with dirt on his hands and shame in his gut. I will never rely on physical labor to survive. I will never mock anyone's job or status. I will always set clear agreements and boundaries. And I will never, ever be ashamed of honest work. They live in me. They guide how I treat others, how I raise my kids, how I carry my past. Because that one summer job, just a kid with a rake and a backpack full of silence, it shaped everything. And sometimes, when I drive through my old neighborhood, I pass the Brenner house. The porch is still there. The swing still creaks in the wind. But it is quiet now. Just a house. Just a memory. And me? I keep walking. Because the man I became. He started with the boy who refused to quit.